What if every time you closed your eyes at night, you weren't just dreaming, you were slipping into another version of yourself in a parallel universe? Welcome to What If Horizons, where we take the bizarre, the impossible, and the downright ridiculous, then ask, yeah, but what if it was real? Let's talk about dreams. Not the boring ones where you show up to work in your underwear, though, let's be honest, those are already horrifying enough, but the ones that feel too real. The ones where you wake up convinced you just lived an entire lifetime as a pirate, or a space explorer, or, heaven forbid, a functioning adult who actually enjoys kale. Now imagine this: what if those weren't just random misfires of your sleeping brain? What if they were real places? Alternate realities where another version of you is out there, living their best or worst life while you're just trying to remember where you left your keys in this one. Think about it. That dream where you were a rock star. That's rockstar you in universe number 472, shredding guitar solos and probably destroying hotel rooms in ways that would make your landlord in this universe weep. That nightmare where you were being chased by a giant marshmallow. Congratulations, you just peeked into post-apocalyptic Candyland you, where sugar is the dominant species, and survival means outrunning sentient desserts. But here's the real kicker. If dreams are alternate realities, then you are technically the nightmare in someone else's head. Somewhere out there, alternate you is waking up in a cold sweat, muttering, I just had the worst dream, I was an accountant. And let's not even get started on lucid dreaming. If you've ever taken control in a dream, flown, fought, or done something that would get you arrested in this dimension, then congratulations, you're not just dreaming. You're hacking the multiverse. Forget the Matrix. You're out here bending reality in your pajamas. Of course, this raises some deeply unsettling questions. If dreams are real, does that mean every weird, nonsensical dream logic moment was actually happening somewhere? Did parallel you really get to work on time, only to realize the office was suddenly underwater, and your boss was a talking dolphin? Because if so, we need to have a serious conversation with the universe about workplace safety regulations. And what about déjà vu? That eerie feeling that you've lived this moment before. Maybe you have, because other you already did it in their timeline. And now your brain's glitching trying to process the crossover episode. So the next time you wake up from a dream that felt too vivid, too strange, or too real to just be imagination, maybe it wasn't. Maybe you just got a sneak peek into another life, one where you're cooler, braver, or at the very least, not wearing mismatched socks. Or, maybe you just ate too much cheese before bed. The multiverse works in mysterious ways. Now let's consider the practical implications if dreams were indeed alternate realities. That embarrassing dream where you showed up to school naked. Turns out naked you was living their truth in some bizarre dimension where clothing was never invented. Meanwhile, you're stuck here worrying about whether stripes clash with plaid. The logistics alone would be mind-bending. Every time you hit snooze, you're essentially abandoning some parallel version of yourself mid-scenario. Imagine being dream you, in the middle of an important presentation about underwater basket weaving, when suddenly, poof, you vanish because real you needed 9 more minutes of sleep. Talk about unreliable narrators. Sleep scientists would need entirely new fields of study. Instead of monitoring brain waves, they'd be tracking dimensional ripples. That sleep lab with all the wires stuck to your head. Now it's basically mission control for multiverse hopping. And good luck getting accurate results when the test subject keeps accidentally timeline hopping into worlds where the laws of physics work differently. Consider the memory aspect. Right now we assume dream memories fade because our brains are bad at storing sleep data. But what if they fade because reality itself is trying to prevent paradoxes? The universe might be protecting us from knowing too much about our other lives, like some cosmic spoiler alert system. That dream where you could fly but forgot by morning. Somewhere, flying you is very disappointed in your lack of recall. Relationships would get complicated fast. That dream where you married your high school crush. Awkward news. In universe number 8294, you actually did. Meanwhile in this reality you're trying to explain to your actual partner why you woke up giving them the side eye. Dream infidelity would take on entirely new meaning when every nighttime fantasy could be someone else's truth. The workforce would need to adapt. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an accountant by day, but in my sleep I'm an intergalactic smuggler in the Andromeda system. Performance reviews would include metrics from all your dream careers. And think about retirement planning when you might have dozens of lifetimes worth of memories to consider. Even simple pleasures would change. That afternoon nap isn't just rest anymore, it's unpaid overtime in another dimension. Sleeping in on weekends becomes less about recovery and more about maintaining your other lives. And good luck explaining to your boss why you're late because your alternate self in the pirate dimension overslept after a rum binge. The medical field would face new challenges. Is sleep paralysis just your consciousness getting stuck between dimensions? Are nightmares actually glimpses into horror movie realities? And what counts as a healthy sleep cycle when you're technically living multiple lives simultaneously? That 8 hours of recommended sleep now comes with the existential dread of 8 hours of other people's problems. Even our concept of self would unravel. Are you the real you, or just one iteration in an infinite series? That strange sense of disconnect when you wake up, maybe it's not grogginess, but the emotional whiplash of switching between realities. The you reading this now might just be today's dominant version, with all the others waiting their turn when you next close your eyes. Perhaps most unsettling is the question of control. If dreams are alternate realities, then every nonsensical dream moment represents a world where the impossible is mundane. Somewhere there's a version of you who routinely has business meetings with talking animals, or commutes to work via rainbow slide. And that's not even getting into the implications of wet dreams, which we'll politely ignore for everyone's comfort. Now let's examine the scientific ramifications if dreams were proven to be alternate dimensions. Physicists would have to rewrite textbooks overnight. That famous Schrödinger's cat thought experiment. Child's play compared to Schrödinger's dreamer, simultaneously a corporate accountant in one reality while being a professional llama groomer in another. Quantum superposition just got a whole lot more personal. The mathematics involved would make string theory look like basic arithmetic. Imagine calculating probability when every decision spawns not just potential outcomes, but entire fully realized universes where each possibility plays out. That anxiety about choosing between tea or coffee in the morning. Turns out both versions of you exist somewhere, with the tea drinking you probably judging the coffee you's life choices from across the dimensional divide. Neuroscience would face its greatest challenge yet. Brain scans might show activity during dreams, but how do you map something that's literally not all in your head? That fMRI machine can track blood flow in your prefrontal cortex, but can it detect when your consciousness is vacationing in dimension X247 where pizza grows on trees? Researchers would need to develop entirely new equipment, perhaps something that measures reality vibrations instead of brain waves. The pharmaceutical industry would have a field day. Sleeping pills wouldn't just be sedatives anymore, they'd be interdimensional travel tickets. That melatonin gummy you take might come with disclaimers about possible side effects including unintentional time spent as a medieval blacksmith or accidental participation in an alien reality show. The FDA approval process would need to account for cross-dimensional contamination risks. Astronomers would need to reconsider the very nature of reality. Forget searching for exoplanets. The real frontier would be mapping the dream multiverse. That telescope pointed at distant galaxies. Useless when the most interesting discoveries are happening inside people's heads every night. The James Webb Space Telescope's successor might be the James Webb Consciousness Scanner, capable of peering into alternate realities through the lens of human sleep. Even basic physics would be up for debate. If dreams are real places, how does gravity work in a world where you can suddenly fly? Why do some dream realities operate with cartoon physics while others feel hyper-realistic? That apple falling on Newton's head might have different rules in other dimensions, which would explain why dream you can eat endless cakes without consequences while awake you gains weight just looking at dessert menus. The technology sector would race to develop dream interfaces. Forget VR headsets. The next big thing would be devices that let you control your dimensional hopping. That smartphone alarm clock. Now it's a multiverse navigation system letting you choose which reality to wake up in. Tech support would get infinitely more complicated when customers call about being stuck in a dimension where all the colors are reversed or where they keep accidentally turning into a teapot. Academic institutions would need complete overhauls. That physics PhD would require coursework in dreamwalking theory. Medical schools would teach interdimensional anatomy. Business programs would need to cover cross-reality commerce, because somewhere there's a version of you who actually understands cryptocurrency and we should probably consult that guy. Perhaps most mind-bending of all is the energy implication. If every dream creates or accesses an entire universe, where does the energy for that come from? That all-nighter you pulled might have literally drained power from alternate dimensions, leaving other versions of you struggling to stay awake at critical moments. The environmental impact statement for human consciousness just got a lot more complicated. Let's explore the social consequences if dream realities became common knowledge. Dating apps would need entirely new filters. Swipe right if your alternate selves are also compatible, or seeking partner whose dream versions won't embarrass me across dimensions. That awkward first date small talk just got exponentially more complicated when you have to account for multiple lifetimes worth of baggage. The legal system would face unprecedented challenges. Could you be held accountable for crimes committed by your dream self? That nightmare where you robbed a bank might land you in hot water if it actually happened somewhere. Law schools would add courses in transdimensional jurisprudence, and public defenders would have the unenviable job of explaining that yes, their client did steal the crown jewels, but only in a reality where they were an international jewel thief with a heart of gold. Social media would become infinitely more chaotic. Instagram would need a dream life toggle showing which version of you is posting. That carefully curated profile, ruined when Dream You keeps uploading photos of your accomplishments as a champion competitive eater in the noodle dimension. Twitter arguments would reach new lows when people start citing their alternate selves as expert witnesses. The education system would require complete restructuring. School counselors would need training to help students traumatized by their other lives. That F in math, maybe because your attention was divided across 15 realities where you were simultaneously failing different subjects. Field trips would take on new meaning when they might literally involve visiting other dimensions, permission slips now including clauses about possible existence in alternate forms. Family dynamics would get complicated fast. Ancestry.com would crash when people discover their dream lineages. That embarrassing uncle everyone avoids. In another reality he's a respected neuroscientist, which somehow makes Thanksgiving dinner even more awkward. Parents would face existential crises realizing their children might have entire other families in different dimensions, complete with cooler versions of themselves as parents. Workplace culture would never be the same. That coworker who's always exhausted. Turns out their dream self is a nightclub owner in Vegas and never sleeps. Performance reviews would need to account for productivity across all your realities, and HR would develop policies for when office drama spills over from other dimensions. The phrase, "that's not like me," would lose all meaning when everything is like some version of you somewhere. Political discourse would reach new levels of absurdity. Campaigns would have to address issues across multiple realities simultaneously. That politicians promise to lower taxes. Meaningless when their dream self in another dimension is a staunch communist. Fact checkers would need teams dedicated to verifying claims across the multiverse, and attack ads would feature embarrassing footage of candidates from their other lives. Even basic social interactions would change. That friend who keeps canceling plans. Now they have the perfect excuse. Their dream self had something better to do in a more interesting reality. Personal boundaries would blur when people feel entitled to know about all your versions. Tell me about yourself would become the most loaded question in history when the answer could literally take lifetimes to explain. The concept of personal identity would become fluid. That carefully crafted persona you present to the world. Meaningless when everyone knows about the version of you that's a professional mime in France or a sentient cloud of gas in the Andromeda system. Social anxiety would take on new dimensions, pun intended, when every interaction carries the weight of infinite possible impressions across realities. Now let's dive into the philosophical implications of dreams as alternate realities. The age-old question, who am I, just got infinitely more complicated when the answer includes, it depends on which dimension you're asking about. That existential crisis you had in college. Multiply it by the number of your dream selves and you've got the makings of a proper multiverse meltdown. The nature of consciousness would be up for debate. If your awareness can exist in multiple realities simultaneously, which version is the real you? That morning grogginess might not just be sleep inertia, it could be your consciousness struggling to consolidate experiences from across dimensions. Philosophers would need new theories to explain how a single sense of self can persist across infinite variations. Free will would face its greatest challenge yet. If every possible decision creates a new reality, are you truly choosing anything, or just following predetermined paths across the multiverse? That anxiety about making the right choice becomes meaningless when every choice is made by some version of you somewhere. The concept of regret takes on new dimensions again, pun intended, when you can theoretically access realities where you made different decisions. The meaning of life would need redefining. If you're living multiple lives simultaneously, does each one need its own purpose? That midlife crisis just got more complicated when you realize you might be thriving in another reality while struggling in this one. Philosophers would need to develop theories that account for cross-dimensional fulfillment, and self-help books would need chapters on how to be happy across realities. The concept of time would be up for grabs. If dreams access alternate realities, do they follow the same temporal rules? That dream that felt like hours might have taken minutes in this reality, or vice versa. The age-old question, what is time, becomes infinitely more complex when it might flow differently in every dimension. Your watch might say it's 8 a.m., but somewhere a version of you is already late for dinner. Reality itself would become a matter of perspective. If dreams are alternate realities, how do we know this waking life isn't someone else's dream? That philosophical thought experiment about being a brain in a vat just got an upgrade. Now you might be someone's REM cycle entertainment. The line between reality and imagination would blur to the point of meaninglessness. Ethics would need complete rethinking. If your actions in dreams affect real lives in other dimensions, does that make you morally responsible? That nightmare where you were the villain might have actually hurt people somewhere. Philosophers would need to develop frameworks for cross-dimensional morality, and the concept of karma would take on literal meaning when your actions in one reality could impact your lives in others. The nature of existence would be up for debate. If you can access alternate realities through dreams, does that make you a single entity or a collection of connected consciousnesses? That feeling of déjà vu might be more than just a glitch, it could be evidence of your other selves' experiences bleeding through. The concept of individuality becomes meaningless when you're part of a multidimensional collective. Even basic philosophical questions would become complex. Do we have souls? Becomes, do we have one soul shared across dimensions, or a soul for each reality? What is the meaning of life? Becomes, which life are we talking about? That philosophy degree just got a lot more complicated when every question has infinite possible answers across realities. Perhaps most unsettling is the question of death. If dreams are alternate realities, does dying in one mean your consciousness continues in others? That near-death experience might have been exactly that, your consciousness shifting focus to another version of yourself. The concept of mortality takes on new dimensions when your existence might continue indefinitely across realities. Now let's consider how technology would adapt if dreams were recognized as alternate realities. The sleep tech industry would explode overnight, quite literally if we're not careful about what our dream selves are tinkering with in mad scientist dimensions. That smartwatch tracking your REM cycle suddenly becomes a dimensional passport control, alerting you when you've overstayed your visa in the world where trees speak sarcastic French. Healthcare apps would need serious upgrades. That meditation app telling you to breathe deeply now comes with disclaimers. Warning, may cause accidental astral projection. Sleep trackers would need to differentiate between tossing from a bad dream versus being violently evicted by your alternate self who needed the reality slot for their big performance review with the Dragon King. The travel industry would face its greatest disruption. Why book expensive flights when your dream self can vacation in any reality free of charge? That luxury beach resort now has to compete with your subconscious version of paradise where cocktails refill themselves and sunburns don't exist. Frequent flyer programs would be replaced by frequent napper rewards, gold status achieved by logging the most consecutive nights exploring the dimension where gravity works sideways. Virtual reality would become downright quaint. Instead of strapping into clunky headsets, we'd have sleep pods designed to enhance inter-reality travel. That VR gaming setup collecting dust in your closet, obsolete now that you can actually become the elf warrior in your dreams, though possibly traumatic when you remember those orcs have very real axes in their dimension. Communication tech would need radical innovation. Imagine texting your alternate selves for advice. Hey dream me, how'd that job interview go in your timeline? That dropped call would take on new meaning when it's your consciousness losing signal between dimensions. Autocorrect fails could be catastrophic if they inadvertently send you to the wrong reality. No one wants to wake up in the version of events where you accidentally agreed to marry the sentient toaster. Home security systems would require major updates. That burglar alarm needs to account for interdimensional intruders now. Sleepwalking takes on terrifying new possibilities if you might actually be physically visiting other planes of existence. That strange noise in your kitchen at 3 a.m. could be the fridge, or it could be your cyborg self from the future dimension raiding your snacks again. Fitness trackers would face an existential crisis. When your dream self climbs mountains while your physical body lies motionless, who gets credit for the cardio? That step count becomes meaningless when some of those steps were taken in a reality with different gravity. Sleep fitness would become the new obsession, personal trainers yelling at clients to dream more actively to burn those interdimensional calories. Even basic appliances would need rethinking. That smart coffee maker sync to your wake-up time. Better hope it communicates with all your versions across realities, or you might pour your first cup just as dream you starts a double shift in the dimension where caffeine causes spontaneous combustion. Smart homes would become infinitely more complex when they have to account for residents who might phase in and out of existence overnight. The data storage industry would boom. With potentially infinite lives to document, that cloud storage subscription suddenly seems inadequate. Imagine the backup paranoia, not just protecting your photos, but preserving memories from realities that might wink out of existence if no one remembers them. That external hard drive now holds not just your tax documents, but evidence that you once ruled a kingdom of sentient otters. Perhaps most unsettling is the thought of dream tech addiction. When reality hopping becomes possible, who would choose to stay in the version with bills and traffic jams? That dystopian future where everyone stays plugged into fantasy worlds. We're already halfway there, we just call it sleeping in on weekends. Let's examine how the entertainment industry would transform if dreams were alternate realities. Hollywood would face an existential crisis. Why pay for expensive CGI when your subconscious can create entire worlds for free? That blockbuster movie franchise now competes with your dream self's personal cinematic universe where you're both the hero and the questionable special effects coordinator. The music industry would need radical reinvention. That catchy tune you woke up humming might not be your brain being creative, it could be a smash hit in another dimension. Copyright law would descend into chaos when artists sue their alternate selves for plagiarism. Streaming services would offer dream playlists, carefully curated to avoid accidentally sending you to realities where polka is the dominant musical form. Video games would become obsolete overnight. Why play through someone else's fantasy when you can live your own every night? That open-world RPG collecting dust on your shelf can't compete with your personal dreamscape where the physics engine actually makes sense. Esports would be replaced by dream tournaments, competitive sleeping where players are judged on the creativity of their alternate realities. Literature would take on new dimensions, pun unavoidable. That novel you're writing might already exist in another reality, you're just transcribing your dream self's best-selling work. Plagiarism accusations would get weird when authors claim their alternate versions wrote it first. Book clubs would need to account for members who actually visited the settings of the stories, though their interpretations might differ wildly depending on which version of the reality they experienced. Theater would face unprecedented challenges. That Broadway musical might have to compete with your dream version where the audience participates and the plot changes nightly based on collective subconscious input. Standing ovations would take on new meaning when they might literally manifest dream creatures onto the stage. Understudies would need to prepare for the possibility that the lead actor might get stuck in a dimension where show tunes are illegal. Reality TV would become infinitely more meta. Instead of watching strangers in fabricated scenarios, viewers could tune into actual alternate realities. That dating show now features genuine multidimensional romance, or at least the awkward collisions of different versions of human social norms. The phrase, "it's just a show," loses meaning when the participants are literally other versions of ourselves. Stand-up comedy would reach new heights. That joke about your weird dream, now it's documentary material. Comedians would mine their alternate lives for material, though the punchlines might get lost in translation between realities. Crowd work becomes dangerous when you might accidentally call out someone's dream self for that embarrassing thing they did in the dimension where social norms are reversed. The porn industry would, actually, let's not explore that avenue. Some doors are better left closed, some dimensions better left unvisited. Moving on, art galleries would need complete reinvention. That abstract painting might not be creative expression, it could be a literal snapshot of another reality's physics. Art critics would face the challenge of evaluating works created by alternate versions of artists under completely different aesthetic paradigms. The line between genius and madness blurs when the artist might actually be seeing different fundamental laws of color and form. Even children's entertainment would change. That cartoon character your kid loves might be someone's actual dream companion from another dimension. Bedtime stories become dangerous when they might serve as portals to other realities. The phrase, "use your imagination," takes on terrifying new possibilities when imagination can reshape actual worlds. Perhaps most unsettling is the potential for dream tourism, the ultimate form of escapism where people pay to experience curated alternate realities. That vacation package to Hawaii seems dull compared to a guided tour of a dimension where the islands float in the sky and the pineapples serve you. The tourism board would need to market this reality as the premium option, visit Earth Prime, where at least the gravity is consistent. Let's explore how history and education would be revolutionized if dreams revealed alternate realities. History textbooks would need constant updates, now filled with footnotes like, as experienced by 37% of dream travelers on Tuesday nights. That boring lecture about the Industrial Revolution just got interesting when your professor mentions the steam-powered dinosaur variant from Dimension XK791. The scientific method would undergo radical changes. Peer review now includes cross-dimensional verification. That physics breakthrough might be commonplace in the floating islands dimension. That lab experiment failing for the 10th time. Turns out it works perfectly in 7 other realities, which somehow makes the failure more frustrating. Research grants would require applicants to explore at least 3 dream versions of their hypothesis. Libraries would become portals to infinite knowledge. That dusty encyclopedia set now competes with your memories from the dimension where Wikipedia exists in smell-o-vision. Study groups take on new meaning when participants compare notes with their dream selves' educations. Imagine the frustration of finding the perfect reference, only to realize you read it in a reality where books are written in reverse alphabetical order. Historical reenactments would become dangerously authentic. That Civil War battle demonstration might accidentally summon actual soldiers from an alternate timeline. Museums would require disclaimers. Some exhibits may be dreaming, after artifacts start changing based on visitors' subconscious connections. The phrase, living history, takes on a literal meaning when the tour guides might actually be time-displaced versions of themselves. Teaching methods would adapt to leverage dream learning. That all-nighter before exams is replaced by strategic naps to consult your alternate self's knowledge. Language classes become easier when you can practice with native speakers in your dreams, though confusing when you wake up mixing 3 dialects from different dimensions. The school motto, "Sleep on it," becomes legitimate academic advice. Academic integrity would face new challenges. That perfect essay might actually be plagiarized from yourself in another reality. Cheating scandals reach new levels when students stand accused of copying their own alternate versions' work. The valedictorian speech gets awkward when 5 dream versions claim equal credit for the achievements. Archaeology would become infinitely more complex. That ancient artifact might be just a rock in our world, but the keystone to interdimensional travel elsewhere. Dig sites would require dream archaeologists to consult alternate versions of the location. The carbon dating process now includes a dimensional resonance measurement to determine which timeline the object belongs to. Historical figures would be re-evaluated through their dream versions. That famous inventor might have been mediocre here but a genius in 5 other realities. Biographies would include dream diary excerpts as primary sources. The History Channel's programming would shift from Aliens to Alternate You, the documentaries. Even personal family history would change. That story grandma always told about her youth. It checks out, in the dimension where people ride giant tardigrades to work. Genealogy research now includes dream visits to verify ancestral claims. The family tree becomes a multidimensional web, with some branches existing only in certain realities. Perhaps most unsettling is how this affects our sense of progress. That innovation you're proud of might be old news elsewhere. That social movement making waves here could have succeeded or failed spectacularly in other dimensions. The phrase, learning from history, takes on cosmic proportions when history includes every possible variation of events. Let's consider the psychological impact of dreams as alternate realities. Therapy sessions would become infinitely more complex when patients have multiple lifetimes worth of trauma to unpack. That anxiety about public speaking, now compounded by the memory of a reality where your presentation caused a literal apocalypse. Psychiatrists would need advanced degrees in cross-dimensional mental health. The concept of self-esteem would need redefining. That feeling of inadequacy just got more complicated when you're comparing yourself to infinite versions of yourself. That career you're proud of might seem less impressive when your dream self is a rock star in one dimension and a Nobel laureate in another. The phrase, "be the best version of yourself," becomes meaningless when there are infinite versions to compare. Mental health diagnosis would require complete overhauls. That diagnosis of depression might need to specify which realities are affected. Personality disorders would need to account for behaviors across dimensions. The DSM would become a multi-volume set, with supplements for interdimensional psychology. Trauma treatment would face unprecedented challenges. That phobia of clowns might stem from an actual clown-related disaster in another reality. PTSD therapy would need to address experiences from multiple lifetimes. The concept of safe spaces becomes complex when the threat might exist in another dimension but still affect the patient here. Relationship counseling would need to adapt to multidimension dynamics. That couple's argument about finances takes on new meaning when one partner remembers a reality where they were bankrupt. Marriage vows would need updating, till death do us part, across all realities. The phrase, "we need to talk," becomes infinitely more ominous when it might involve comparing notes with alternate versions of your relationship. Child psychology would face unique challenges. That imaginary friend might actually be a real companion from another dimension. Developmental milestones would need to account for cross-dimensional influences. The concept of acting out takes on new meaning when the behavior might be bleed through from a reality where it's perfectly normal. The concept of normalcy would be up for debate. That behavior you think is strange might be completely ordinary in 7 other realities. Mental health stigma would need to be addressed across dimensions. The phrase, "everyone's a little crazy," becomes a literal truth when considering the full spectrum of human behavior across realities. Even basic psychological concepts would need re-examination. That personality test you took, meaningless when your traits vary wildly across dimensions. The nature versus nurture debate becomes infinitely more complex when you have infinite versions of both to consider. The concept of personal growth takes on cosmic proportions when you're developing simultaneously across realities. Perhaps most unsettling is how this affects our sense of identity. That carefully constructed sense of self becomes meaningless when you're simultaneously infinite other versions. The phrase, "know thyself," becomes an impossible challenge when the self is a multidimensional concept. The search for meaning in life becomes infinitely more complex when you're living infinite lives simultaneously. As we reach the end of this mind-bending exploration, one thing becomes clear: the nature of reality is far stranger than we ever imagined. If dreams truly are alternate realities, then every night we become time travelers, dimension hoppers, and creators of entire worlds, all while wearing our most questionable pajamas. This revelation challenges everything we thought we knew about existence. That mundane life you led during the day, it's just one thread in an infinite tapestry of possibilities. The you reading this now is simultaneously a pirate, a poet, and probably a sentient cloud of gas in some distant corner of the multiverse. So what do we do with this knowledge? First, embrace the chaos. That weird dream where you were a competitive noodle slurper. Celebrate it. It's part of your multidimensional legacy. Second, take your sleep seriously. Those 8 hours aren't just rest, they're an adventure across realities. And finally, be kind to yourself, and all yourselves. The version of you in this reality might be struggling, but somewhere out there, alternate you is thriving, and that's worth celebrating. The implications of this theory are vast, unsettling, and endlessly fascinating. It redefines our understanding of consciousness, identity, and the very fabric of reality. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, one thing is certain: the next time you close your eyes, you're not just dreaming, you're exploring the infinite possibilities of existence. So, dreamers, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep sleeping. The multiverse depends on it. If this journey through the dream multiverse sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to What If Horizons for more mind-expanding explorations. Share your thoughts. What would your dream reality look like? And remember, somewhere out there, a version of you is already doing all these things, so why not join them? sweet dreams, and happy dimension hopping.